Thank you, and thank you all for being here today. How many of you have pets? Wow, holy moly, I didn't expect that many. All right, well that's great, because we're going to be talking about how to keep your pets clean. And I'm in Little Falls, and I've been there for about 10 years now. Detoxification, what is it? You know, our animals pick up substances, collect substances, they're in their bodies, they get to a certain level, they need to be removed in order to stay healthy. And detoxification is allowing the body to do what it's naturally supposed to do, and that is remove those toxins, keep them to a safe level so the body can operate normally. We do it basically by fasting. And by fasting, you're limiting new substances, you're allowing the body to spew out what it doesn't need, and you have to supply certain nutrients and lots of water to help the process. And that is, we'll be talking about the actual nutrients, etc. All right. There's 5 considerations we're going to talk about. Let's just go right to it. Number 1, how do we know the animal needs detoxification? All right, any pet that is exposed to toxins, and they all are, they live on the ground, so even more so than us, maybe. In the people's lawns, there's lots of chemicals, certainly on the floor and on our chairs and sofas and other furniture. They're treated with chemicals that help to keep the flame retardant, to keep it from catching on fire, and those things help to cause hypothyroidism, hyperthyroidism, and there's other things that are in the food and drugs, etc., that we're going to talk about later. But basically, so we assume that every pet needs detoxification, and there are certain signs that if you see one or more of these signs, you can assume that there's toxicity that needs to be removed. And especially, we have a lot of pets that have chronic diarrhea, a lot of pets that have chronic dermatitis, if they cannot climb steps or jump, and yet there's no evidence from x-rays or from physical examination that they have arthritis or such, then that could be caused by toxicity. They're not functioning properly in their minds, walking down the hall and just stopping and not knowing where they are, that kind of thing, wounds that won't heal. So these are signs that we might have to detoxify right away. So where do they come from? There's obvious poisons, and we're talking about clear chemicals in our environment, yes, but also drugs, also vaccines. I try to minimize vaccines to just puppyhood or kittenhood and not give vaccines past that. Instead give vaccinal titers, take blood tests to prove that the animal is protected and doesn't need more vaccines. Food additives, okay, I consider them as part of the drugs. Flavorings, colorings, preservatives, things that just are very toxic to animals. Then also insecticides. We use Frontline and other kinds of things on the surface of their skin that gets absorbed into their body, also by mouth once a month. Things that are repellents for fleas and ticks, but they're not just repellents, they also kill those little critters, and so we can imagine they'd be toxic to our pets. Also, normal chemicals that are part of the breakdown of old cells, and there's a bacteria and virus, etc. There are chemicals that build up in the body naturally. There are certain foods in excess that are toxic. That shouldn't say B6, it should say niacin. You have all this in your notes, by the way. Leaky gut allows incompletely digested foods to get through the body, to get through the intestines, get into the bloodstream, and cause toxic type reactions, allergic reactions, etc. All right, so where do toxins go in the body? Of course, first in the blood. Hopefully, they're processed by the liver, but what the liver can't remove and the kidneys are stored in the body's fat, or if the body's fat gets too full, then you get back to the rest staying in the blood, and we can have it. There's lots of damage that they can do. I'm not going to go, you have this in your handout, but the worst thing that can happen is you get mitochondrial level damage that can't repair. But we talked about dermatitis and diarrhea and pain. These are chronic toxin levels that cause that. And then, of course, they can cause damage to the liver and kidneys, heart, muscle, brain, and they can be lethal. And they can progress even further and cause the immune system to not function properly, the nervous system to not function properly. Leaky gut can allow toxins in, but too much toxins can cause more leaky gut. So you can see there's a cycle that can be worse. All right, so how do we remove toxins? This might get into a little bit too much science, but basically there are enzymes in the body that allow the pets to detoxify, and of course this works in people too. There's two types of enzymes, the oxidative and the conjugative enzymes, and we have to pay attention to both when we do go through the detoxification process. Basically, the liver breaks down oxidized substances into, including free radicals, and water and antioxidants help to remove those. So that's the first phase. So increasing fluid intake, increasing circulation. I don't know if you are familiar with the Beamer pad that helps that, and using antioxidants, as I said, and decreasing protein intake in dogs, but not cats. No problem. So the second phase would be the conjugative phase, or the second type of enzymes that are needed, and the second type of detoxification that has to occur. And so basically the liver gloms on certain substances like amino acids to the toxins, and then they get removed from the body. So if they're aqueous, they get removed through the kidneys, and if they're fat soluble, they get removed through the bile. So, and there has to be a proper level of enzymes, level 1, level 2. I'm not going to go into that too much, but when we do detoxify, and I mentioned about fasting, we have to supply certain nutrients. So for a dog, that's mainly glycine. For a cat, it's mainly glucuronic acid. And there's other things that we have to supply too. So it's not the same for a dog and cat. And if there's too much of one kind of too much of level 1, phase 1 enzymes, too little of phase 2, we have problems too. That's another lecture. So how do we repair and prevent the damage done by toxins? Well, number one, avoid them. Don't use these chemical repellents for fleas and ticks and mosquitoes. Instead, use essential oils. Instead of using food that has all kinds of preservatives and flavorings and colorings, give raw food. Raw food, number one, has a lot more nutrients because cooking destroys a lot of the nutrients. 25 to 50% of them, depending on which nutrient you're talking about. Plus, in order to preserve raw food, all you have to do is freeze it. So you're not talking about chemicals to prevent it, to preserve it. And they naturally taste so good that you don't have to add any flavorings, all right? So there is a detox method, and you do it slowly. It takes 3 days, and if necessary, repeat 1 to 3 weeks later. You can assume that every pet needs to be detoxified. I would do that maybe once every 6 months and just go through a 3-day detox. If an animal is showing signs of illness, then it's probably a good idea, or if they have chronic illness like skin problems, it's probably a good idea to repeat it after a couple weeks and make sure that you see a change. Now, it's not necessarily detoxification that's going to do the whole trick. There's lots of other things. I'm going to jump to some notes that I made, because it's not just fasting and providing the nutrients, but you also want to support the organs of detoxification, as all the speakers have mentioned. You want to support the liver, you want to support the gastrointestinal tract, you want to support the skin, you want to support the lungs, you want to support the kidneys. All those are involved with removing toxins from the body. So chiropractic, acupuncture, aromatherapy using essential oils. There are specific oils like lemon and rosemary, juniper. There are Bach flowers, like crabapple, that help to remove toxins. Homeopathy can help, homotoxicology. So a lot of what we do in holistic medicine that's not even touched in non-alternative medicine is a lot of what we do is geared to allowing the body to do what it's supposed to do, what it naturally should do. So just a lot of water. And one thing I should have mentioned is cats specifically have a problem. They don't drink enough water. Biologically, they depend on their food to supply almost all their water. In fact, if you see a cat drinking, it might not be okay. If they drink once in a great while, fine. But they basically should have enough water in their food to to supply their needs. And if they're not getting enough water, they're not detoxifying. Anyway, thank you very much. And I wish you all